Lech lecha to a place that you do not know. Lech eloch, on your journey I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. Lech eloch. Lech eloch, and I shall make your name great. Lech lecha, and all shall praise your name. Lech eloch, to the place that I will show you. L'simchat chayim, l'simchat chayim, l'simchat chayim, lech eloch.
Thank you so much for that beautiful opening. And we're now going to light candles, page 118, and Marion is going to lead us.
As these candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us, as their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Oh, there we go.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav, asher kirishanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu להדליק נר של שבת, של שבת, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו, וציוונו להדליק נר של שבת. Amen.
With that, we commence our journey through the Psalms, and so please the congregation may be seated. We are on page 130. We have six psalms each day of the week effectively, and then we arrive at L'chadodi, which transitions us into the Shabbat. So we'll go through them. Lechu neranena lahadonai, nahariya letzur yishehinu, nekat mafana betoda, v'hizmirot nariya lo, ki el gadol Adonai. Yeshuat Eloheinu, Hariu Ladonai Kol Haaretz, Pitzchu v'ranenu v'zameru, Zamru Ladonai Bechinor, Bechinor v'kol Zimra, B'chatzotrot v'kol Shofar, Hariu Lifnei HaMelech Adonai Yiramayam, Umelo'o, Tevel v'yosh v'eva, Neharot Yimcha uchaf, Yachad Arim Yeraneinu Lifnei Adonai Kiva Lishpot Haaretz Yishpot Tevel B'tzedek V'amim B'mei Sharim. The choir will now lead us in Zamru from that same psalm.
Zamru l'Adonai b'chinor, b'chinor v'kol zimra, b'chatzotrot v'kol shofar. Hariu lifnei HaMelech Adonai, Zamru l'Adonai b'chinor, b'chinor v'kol zimra, b'chatzotrot v'kol shofar. Hariu lifnei HaMelech Adonai, Yiram hayam umlav, Tevel v'yoshveva, Neharot Yimcha uchaf, Harim Yerenenu, Lifnei Adonai Kiva, Lishpot Haaretz, Yishpot Tevel B'tzedek, V'yamim B'mei Sharim. Yiram hayam umlav, Tevel v'yoshveva, Neharot Yimcha uchaf, Harim Yerenenu.
So we go through our week, and as we go through the week, we let go of all the various stresses and strains that we've had as we make space for the Shabbat. And that's the idea of Kabbalat Shabbat, that we can't just go straight into Mizmor Shir, the Psalm of the Sabbath, but we allow ourselves a space between the week and the Sabbath. And so page 135, we're going to read in English, and then the choir will lead us in Romamu. God enshroned on cherubim is sovereign, peoples tremble, the earth quakes. God is great in Zion and exalted above all peoples. They praise your name as great and awesome. God is holy. Mighty ruler who loves justice, it was you who established equity, you who worked righteous judgment in Jacob. Exalt the eternal our God and bow down to God's footstool. God is holy. Exalt the eternal our God and bow toward God's holy hill, for the eternal our God is holy. last of our psalms takes us into the Lachadodi, and it's the psalm where God's name is mentioned 18 times, 18 for the standing for the word life in Jewish tradition, Chai. So we're going to sing together. Those of you who know how to chant, join me. Mizmor LeDavid, havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kevod shemo, ishtachavu l'Adonai b'hadrat kodesh, kol Adonai al hamayim, el hakavod hirim, Adonai al mayim rabim, kol Adonai Bakoachai kol Adonai behadar kol Adonai shover arazim vayeshaber Adonai et arzei halevanon vayarkideim kemo egel levanon v'siron kemo ben re'emim ayay kol Adonai chotzev lahavot esh kol Adonai yachil midbar yachil Adonai midbar Kadesh kol Adonai yecholei ayalot vayechesov yeharot uveheichalo kulo omer kavod ayayay Adonai lamabu yashav yeshev Adonai melech leolam Adonai oz le'amo yitein Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom nai 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 Nai, 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 nai. And so before we move into that Lachadodi, that transitional composition, we will just have a few minutes just to contemplate our week, just to let go of all our stresses and our strains and to allow ourselves into the space of the Shabbat. So let's just have a few moments of quiet. and bar, gam besimcha uvetzola, toch emune am segura, Likrat kala, penei Shabbat, So with that beautiful sound of Leonard Cohen, and we bring in the Shabbat, and so we're going to now do the Psalm of the Shabbat, finally, Mizmor Shir, that's the Psalm of the Shabbat. And to lead us into that, I hand over to our musicians.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, באמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נובר, עלי היגיון בחינם. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון.
יבין את זאת. צדיק כתמר יפרח כארז ולבנון יזכה, שתולים בבית אדוני בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו, עוד ינובון בשיבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו, להגיד כי אשר אדוני צורי ולא עוולת בו. And page 141, אדוני מלאך גאות לבש, לבש אדוני עוז התעזר, אף תיכון תבל בל תימות. נכון כי שכה מאז מעולם אתה, נשאו נהרות אדוני, נשאו נהרות כולם, יישאו נהרות דוח ים.
מקולות מים רבים, אדירים אדירים, משברי ים. מקולות מים רבים, אדירים אדירים, משברי ים. די די די, אדירים אמרם אדוני, אדירים אמרם אדוני.
לבטך נאווה קודש, Adonai leorech yamim. Page 144. Congregation, please stand for the Chatzi Kaddish and the Baruch Hu.
Yit Gadol v'yit Kadosh Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Bal ma divrach iroteh v'yamlich malchoteh b'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei dachar Beit Yisrael u'galav izman karev v'yimaru. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitrobam v'yitnaser v'yitchara v'yitale shmida kodsha brichu leila min kol bichata v'shirota tush bechata v'nechemata damiran be'alma v'yibara.
So we turn to page 148, and we're in the lead up to the Shema, the two blessings, and the congregation may be seated. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah potech sharim, u'bitvuna meshane tim, u'machalif et hazmanim, u'mesader et hakochavim, b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or, u'ma'avir yom u'meivi layla, u'mavdil ben yom u'mein layla, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. And so we're on page 150, and Lee will lead us in the Ahavat Olam.
Ah
So we arrive at that very crucial point in our service, the Shema, where we proclaim the oneness of God, and we will be led in the Shema by Lee, and then we'll sing together the rest of the Shema. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. 155, the second paragraph, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. In page 156 we'll say this in English. All this we hold to be true and trustworthy for us. You alone are our God, and we are Israel, your people. You are our sovereign and Savior, who delivers us from oppressors' hands and saves us from tyrants' fists. You work wonders without number, marvels beyond count. You give us life and steady our footsteps. You perform miracles for us before Pharaoh, signs and wonders in the land of the Egyptians. You led your people Israel out from their midst to freedom for all time. When your children witnessed your dominance, they praised your name in gratitude, and they accepted your sovereignty. Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang to you together, lifting their voices joyously.
Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha neda b'kodesh. Nora tehilot asefele, nora tehilot asefele. Malachutecha ra'u v'necha bokeu yom livnei Moshe zili anu ve'amero Adonai imlach Adonai imlach le'olam va'ed.
Lo miyad chazak bimenu, Baruch ata Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Page 160. This is again our prayer for peace. And let us say together In English, grant, O God. Grant, O God, that we lie down in peace and raise us up, our sovereign, to life renewed. Spread over us the shelter of your peace. Guide us with your good counsel, and for your name's sake be our help. Shield and shelter us beneath the shadow of your wings. Defend us against enemies, illness, war, famine, and sorrow. Distance us from wrongdoing. For you, God, watch over us and deliver us. For you, God, are gracious and merciful. Guard our going and our coming, to life and to peace forevermore. Blessed are you, Eternal One, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, over Jerusalem, and over the whole world. Baruch atah. We're going to hand over to Lee to lead us in Ufros Aleinu.
Ufros Aleinu,
Sukkot
Shlomecha. Ufros Aleinu, Sukkot Shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai, haboreh Sukkot Shalom, aleinu ve'al kol u'mo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Ufros aleinu, Sukkot Shlomecha. Ufros aleinu, Sukkot Shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai, haboreh Sukkot Shalom, aleinu ve'al kol u'mo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim, ve'al Yerushalayim, ve'al Yerushalayim. Amen.
Rendition of Ufros Aleinu, we go to page 162, and we have a more joyous song about keeping the Shabbat, those who delight in the keeping of the Shabbat.
Yam bam bam bam, Shabbat Shabbat. Yam bam bam bam, Shabbat Shabbat. Yam bam bam bam, Shabbat Shabbat. Shabbat Shabbat, Shabbat Shabbat. Yismachu Yismachu malchutcha. Yismachu Yismachu malchutcha. Shomrei Shabbat, Shomrei Shabbat. V'korei oneg oneg Shabbat. Shomrei Shabbat, Shomrei Shabbat. V'korei oneg oneg Shabbat. Aham mekadeshei shevim, kulam yizbehu v'yitagnu, mitovecha Shabbat, Shabbat. Yismachu Yismachu malchutcha. Yismachu Yismachu malchutcha. Shomrei Shabbat, Shomrei Shabbat. V'korei oneg oneg Shabbat. Shomrei Shabbat, Shomrei Shabbat. V'korei oneg oneg Shabbat. Ve'oshevi ratzita bo, ratzita bo v'kidashta. Chemdat yamim ata karata, zechel ma'aseh v'reishit. Yismachu Yismachu malchutcha. Yismachu Yismachu
congregation may stand up now for the tefillah, the Amidah, standing prayer, and I will lead it. Please join in. We'll have a few songs also from the choir. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agi tehilatecha, eternal God. Open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu v'imoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem L'man Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magein Baruch Atah Adonai Magein Abraham V'Ezrat Saram Ata Gibor Leolam Adonai Mechayei Meitim Ata Rav Mehoshia Mashiv Haruach Umri Dageshem Mazriach HaShemesh Umori Hatal Mechalkel Chayim Bechesed Mechayei Meitim Berachamim Rabim Somech Noflim Verofei Cholim Umatir Asurim Umekayim Emunato Lishene Afar Mi Chamocha Ba'al Gevurot Umi Hidom Melach Melech Meimit Umachayeh Umatzniach Yeshua V'ne'emanata L'hachayot Meitim Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayei HaMeitim Ata Kadosh V'Shimcha Kadosh U'Kdoshim B'Chol Yom Yehalelucha Selah Baruch Ata Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Page 172. Ata Kidashta Et Yom Hashvi Lishmecha Tachlit Masei Shamayim Ba'aretz Uberachto Mikol Hayamim V'Kidashto Mikol Hazmanim V'chen Katuv V'Toratecha Vayechulu Hashamayim V'Aretz V'chol Tzva'am Vayechal Elohim Bayom Hashvi Melachto Asher Asam Vayishvot Bayom Hashvi Mikol Melachto Asher Asam Vayevarech Elohim Et Yom Hashvi Vayekadesh Oto Ki bo Shabbat Mikol Melachto Asher Bara Elohim La'asot Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avoteinu V'Imoteinu Ritzei V'Nuchateinu Kadshenu B'mitzvotecha V'Teichalkeinu V'Toratecha Sabeinu Mituvecha V'Zabcheinu B'Shuatecha V'Taher Libeinu Le'Ovdecha Be'emet Yanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu V'Aval Ratzon Shabbat Kodshecha V'Anuchu V'Yisrael Mekadeshei Shemecha Baruch Atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen.
with thanks that you are our eternal God and the God of our ancestors forever. You are the rock of our lives and the shield of our salvation in every generation. Let us thank you and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your care, for your miracles that we experience every day, and for your wondrous deeds and favors at every time of day, evening, morning, and noon. O good one, whose mercies never end, O compassionate one, whose kindness never fails, we forever put our hope in you. Yal kulam yitbarach v'yitromam, shivcha malkeinu tamid leolam va'ed, v'chol hachayim yoducha sela, v'yalu et shivcha be'emet ha'el yeshuateinu ve'ezrateinu sela, baruch ata Adonai, atov shimcha, u'lecha na'eh lehodot.
Shalom Rava Yisrael Hasid Le'olam. Shalom Rava Yisrael Hasid Le'olam. Ki Atahu Melech Hador Lechol Shalom.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha, Tasim le'olam.
V'tov b'necha levarech et Amcha Yisrael. B'chol beit ובכל שעה ישלום לך. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. שלום רב על ישראל עמך, תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם. תשים לעולם.
Praise the eternal one who blesses your people Israel and the whole world with peace. The congregation may be seated. We will have a few moments of silent meditation before we'll have Yiyul Ratzon. So please let yourself reflect and allow yourself to just switch off and contemplate what you wish to leave behind from the past week and what you wish to hold on to into the Shabbat space. so we move to the prayer for those of us who are not well in our community, and we wish particularly at this point, and I'll give members of the congregation here an opportunity to also mention people who are not on the list. But we have a mention of the following who are not well, and we wish them a refuah shlema: Marion Bubley, Peter Danheiser, Belle Gonsalves, Nate Herskowitz, Stephen Jacobs, Barry Levine, Kathy Singer, and Robert Thompson. Those of you on Zoom, you can put names into the chat box, and people here, if you want to, you can in your heart, or you can just call out the name for the community as a whole as I move my hand around. Is anyone you're thinking of? And we're on page 511 for the Misha Barach. Thank you very much for the beautiful singing of Lee and the music of our musicians. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's good to have you with us, those of you online and those of you here. We start a new sort of whole book in the Torah tomorrow. We've been reading the Leviticus, the priestly code, and we know Leviticus has given us some difficulty, and we've heard some very interesting thoughts from Simon a few weeks ago on disability and a range of other issues that come up in Leviticus. And now we're back to more of a narrative book in the Torah, and the first, and actually in Hebrew it's called Bamidbar, which is, it's from the early words of the book. That's always where the name of the book is taken from. And in English, we know it as Numbers, okay? And in Hebrew, Bamidbar doesn't mean numbers at all. It means in the desert. Very good, right? So it means in the desert, right? And actually, that's a better description, right? Numbers, well, a lot of this portion, if you come tomorrow, for those of you who are going to be here, you will read a lot about the census. There's a census that takes place of the Jewish people, and particularly the men, right, and who's there, and there's a lot of detail around the census, etc. So that's perhaps why those who translated it called it Numbers. But actually, that's not what the whole book's about, right? It's actually about more what the Hebrew has, right? And Hebrew talks about wanderings in the wilderness, right? Being in the wilderness. And the wilderness is itself a fascinating idea, right? And it's a fascinating space. And tonight I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some concepts of why are we focused so much on the wilderness, right? And the wilderness is very much the space in between. It's the space from moving from the Exodus. We moved out from Egypt, and we're on the way to the Promised Land. And lots of things happen in that space in between. And in fact, the Jewish nation is forged in that space. The old generation dies out, the young generation comes in. And it's a space that we're going to read about of great anxiety. It's a difficult space. It's a space of rebellion. It's a space of self-doubt. It's a space of many, many different things that we're going to read about over the next period as we are kind of forged. So why the wilderness? And there's a number of sources that we can look at. One aspect of the wilderness is its very formlessness and the very fact that it's, seems to be almost the same, this endless dunes, endless sands, and somehow there's an endlessness against which it's almost like a blank slate against which we need to write our own stories. And there's also something about it that seems not very ordered, something that we can't manage ourselves, and we have to, in some senses, impose order on it. So that's one idea of the formlessness of the wilderness against which we write the backdrop of our own stories. The Midrash, there's an interesting Midrash which says the following: why was the Torah given in the wilderness? Because the wilderness is open and accessible to all humankind. As it is said, let everyone who is thirsty come for Torah, for water. Why was the Torah not given in the promised land? So that no one tribe would have a preferred claim. So here we have two very interesting ideas. The first is that in some sense the Torah was given to be accessible to everyone, and interestingly not just the Jewish people. Actually, it was meant to be accessible to everyone, and somehow there's a space of non-ownership in the wilderness. No one can really claim the wilderness or to claim control over the wilderness, right? And so the Torah is given in a space that is open, that's accessible, that everyone can access. And we see that in the next idea as well, right? That the Torah was given in the promised land so that no one tribe was not given in the promised land, so that no one tribe would have a preferred claim. The moment you move in, and we know as we go on that different portions of land were promised to different tribes, then someone would say, well, this is mine. I can lay claim to it. I can lay ownership to it. So to avoid that problem, we give it in a space of non-ownership. And that's quite a radical idea as well for our world, where we feel that everything is owned. We have sovereignty over everything in the world. And somehow there's a space outside sovereignty, outside, right, the domain of our control and our power. Another interesting source I found was by Adler, and he said the following: what an unlikely place to meet God. How quickly we decide when we are faced with uncongenial circumstances that we are not likely to be able to communicate with God. How often do we quickly and glibly defend our spiritual obtuseness by pointing to unfavorable conditions and situations. This book reminds us that there is no condition, there is no circumstance, there is no travail in which people cannot hear the voice of God if they are determined to hear it. Out of the desert with all its dangers came the Torah, which is the proudest possession and given to our group life as Jews its most authentic character, and to all humanity the most valid promise of continuing creative contributions to the total fund of human understanding. That voice spoke in the desert. So in the space, this unlikely space, outside the space, we find some kind of connection. We're able to hear something. We're able to connect in some way with the divine, and we're able also to build a space of connection between ourselves and something else, something outside, right? And many people will talk about this, about the experience of the desert, right? I know one of my friends recently went to Burning Man in the middle of the Karoo, and why, I was like, why do you go there? It's quite harsh, it's quite difficult, right? You have to bring everything yourself, and he was saying, and it's an amazing space in a certain way, right? You go and you commune in a certain way. There's a kind of feeling of just nothingness, and that very nothingness with somehow coming and creating a kind of human community amongst it has a very special feeling amongst it, right? A feeling to it, right? So that is something interesting, and those of you who've been in some of our stark spaces, I haven't been to a sort of Burning Man type situation, but just having been and walked a bit at the Karoo, for example, and the starkness, there's something quite connecting about it, and from which you can perhaps, even amongst the starkness, come into ourselves in some way. The Hasidic source says that the wilderness is the most miserable of all places. Having received the Torah there, it says Israel could take its Torah to the deprived of the earth, and from lowliness ascend to the heights. So that's very interesting, right? They actually say, well, what a miserable place. It's a place that's inhospitable for human life, and it was given there precisely because it was not luxurious, precisely because it was actually a difficult space. And so precisely there we learn humility. There we learn to be with people who don't have. We learn that that was the condition in which the Torah was. And the Torah is teaching us that our responsibility to those who don't have, to those who are less well off, to those in conditions that are incredibly inhospitable. And a last midrashic source says, who preserves the Torah? Those who make themselves like the wilderness, set apart from the world. And I think this is quite interesting, right? I mean, that's a big debate as to whether we should be set apart from the world. That's actually not one could debate as to whether that's a very Jewish idea. Jews we have this idea of tikkun olam, of getting involved, of changing the world. But in many ways, it's a space apart. It's a space outside. It's a perspective on which to see other parts of the world. And it reminded me of a wonderful passage from the great thinker and theorist and intellectual Edward Said. And he said the following. He was talking about intellectuals and migration. And he says the following: it is no exaggeration to say that liberation as an intellectual mission, born in the resistance and opposition to the confinements and ravages of imperialism, has now shifted from the settled, established, and domesticated dynamics of culture to its unhoused, decentered, and exilic energies whose incarnation today is the migrant, and whose consciousness is that of the intellectual and the artist in exile, the political figure between domains, between forms, between homes, and between languages. From this perspective, then, all things are indeed counter, original, spare, and strange. And I think Said interestingly here points out about this space in between, and the way in which he's very clear we should not romanticize the position of migrants who are in terrible, terrible conditions, etc., and the intellectuals in exile for whom there are many difficulties as well. But it also provides, just like in its own life, it does provide a perspective on society, a perspective on which to view other things in a perhaps creative and novel way, and also to look at the way in which things actually need to change. Rather than from being an insider, we move outside, and we're able to, from the perspective of the wilderness, see what's wrong and hopefully contribute through, in his case, he's talking about intellectuals, to advancing our knowledge and to changing the way the world is for the better. Now, I couldn't but help reflect a bit about wildernesses and how very literally, as Said mentions, many people are in the wilderness today. We can just think of how people have had to flee for their lives in Sudan and have landed up. Many people have escaped, many people haven't escaped, and they've just had to leave their homes because of fear of war and just go off into spaces which are very inhospitable. Some people really struggling to find anything to eat, and other people managing to go as refugees to other places. I think, too, we had this week the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. And I think of the people in Uganda who are faced with a law which, for consensual relationships between people of the same sex, prescribes the death, not the death penalty, life imprisonment, right? And how horrific that people suddenly who amongst their society, who beautiful people who just want to live and to love, are being forced either to live in the shadows or to leave their own societies and move into the wilderness. And so we can think about many examples in this situation of people who are forced literally into that space. And we can also think about the way in which we can think of the wilderness metaphorically as that space in between. And I was thinking very much about South Africa and how we are so much at the moment in that space in between. How we've left behind forever and for good the terrible apartheid system of discrimination, it's entrenched discrimination on grounds of race, and we're moving towards something else. We've kind of defined it to some extent in our constitution, but we're not yet there by any means, and we're not yet sure even where we totally are headed to. And so that space in between has become quite messy, and we've seen people trying to rise to the top and utilize the space to enrich themselves. We're seeing collapsing institutions, we're seeing increasing crime, we're seeing a failure to provision for the most basic services in our society for those who are least well off. And so the question is, how do we move from the wilderness? And I'll just add a message as well, because we're talking about Jewish community. I think that we also see at the moment, because we've seen some very troubling and horrible scenes from Israel this week, how our own, the state of Israel is also struggling still to establish itself and to find its way from being created to create a space of the promised land, which is one in which the peoples who live within it and who are in fact, and who live in that whole area are able to live in harmony, and that it's still struggling to do. So what do we learn, in a sense, from our tradition of how to navigate that space of the wilderness? And I struggled with this as I was thinking about it. And I think there were two aspects, because we don't get any easy answers from our Torah, right? The Torah ends actually at the verge where the children of Israel haven't arrived yet in the promised land, and they're on the verge of entering. And then when we move into the next books of Joshua and the Judges and the Kings, it's not a simple, it's not an easy time, and there are wars and there's difficulties, and it's really quite difficult to establish a stable society. And so we learn, we don't learn that it's going to be easy at all. But I think what the messages are that we get in some ways is there are two important aspects that we have to be guided by. The one is in a belief in Jewish tradition that's going to be God, but depending on how you understand God, it's got to be the idea of a better space, the idea of an ideal, the idea of something else that can be better than where we are, to move beyond the space in between to where we want to be. And so we have to have some guiding ideal, which is what I understand the space of God to be, the space of what's ultimately good and true and beautiful. That's the space of the godly. And then we need a code. We need a practical code of how to implement that as well, of how to achieve that, a set of rules, a set of principles that enable us to move from the wilderness to the promised land. And in Jewish tradition, that's the Torah. And of course, as we know, there's rebellions against those rules, those principles. And I'm not sure, as we say, as we progressive Jews, we wouldn't necessarily take all these principles without engaging with how they apply in the modern world in the same way. But what we can take from it, and I think is very, very seminal to us, is firstly, we need to retain, in a sense, that faith and hope, and it's very hard to do against the continual issues that we read about, the entrenchment of a deep corruption in the state, for example. But we have to have a sense that some things can be better than they are. And the second thing is, we have to affirm and stand up against those who continually seek to take us down, those who continually say that all there is is just materialism. All there is our own personal self-interest. And we need to stand up for something more, for something beyond. We need to affirm a code of ethics in concrete ways that guide our society. And we need to have strong leaders and strong members of civil society who take us in that path. That is, to some extent, what gives me some hope for South Africa, is that we do have many people still who hold on to that vision and who also are strongly ethical. But we certainly have gathering clouds, and we're going to need to have a major push if we're going to move towards the promised land. And so with that, we're going to move to the conclusion of our service. We're going to do the counting of the Omer. It's the last time on Shabbat we're going to count the Omer. And because we are coming to Shavuot on Thursday night with a wonderful learning program. So we'll talk about that in some of the announcements. But last night was 43 days of the Omer. So you can work out what tonight is. Lee, over to you. Hayom 44 yom shehem shisha shavuot u'shnei yamim la'omer. Today is the 44th day, which makes 6 weeks and 2 days of the Omer. And so, page 586, we're going to Aleinu, and please stand up. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ ומושב יקרו, והשמיים על שכינת זו בגבוהי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. page 588, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום ושבתה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת, אין עוד. על כן נקווה לך אדוני אלוהינו לראות מהרה בתפארת עוזך, להעביר גילולים מן הארץ והאלים קרות יקרצו, לתקן עולם במלכות שדי, וכל בני בשר יקראו בשמך, להפנות אליך כל אשר הארץ יכירו וידעו כל אשר תבל, כי לך תקרא כוברת שבת כל לשון, לבניך אדוני אלוהינו יכרו ויפולו, ולכבוד שמך יקר יתנו, ויקבלו כולם את עול מלכותך
ותמלוך עליהם מהרה לעולם דאל. כי המלכות שלך היא ולמעט תמלוך בכבוד, כך כתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
echad. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. And this week particularly, we mourn with the family of Professor Barry Dwelatsky. Our sincere condolences to the family, including our members Rena King and Jody Dwelatsky. He passed away earlier this week and was laid to rest on Wednesday. We feel with the family and wish them long life. We also are remembering in terms of Yortzeit, in terms of the memorial this week, Gregory Abramovitz, brother of Tessa Abramovitz, George Burik, brother of Ernest Burik, Molly Golden, mother of Neville Golden, Max Harris, husband of Elizabeth Harris, Morris Hurwitz, father of Harriet Davis, Francis Joseph, wife of Peter Joseph, Rachel Rubenstein, grandmother of Rabbi Julia Margolis, Vera Sachs, grandmother of Carolyn Massey, and Baba Selsik, husband of Reza Selsik. May their memory be for a blessing. If anyone wants to mention anyone else, please mention their names now as I move my hand around. I will mention Jeff Cohen Dorfman. And so together, for these people and for all those who don't have anyone to say Kaddish for them, we say Yit Gadal v'Yit Kadash Shmei Rabbah. B'alma divra chivutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chaychon u'v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah vorach leolam u'lomei omaya Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei d'kudsha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata Damiran Belma Bimru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Bimru Amen. Ose Shalom Bimromav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael V'al Kol Olam Bimru Amen. Congregation may be seated. I'm not sure if anyone is going to give announcements from the congregation. We definitely have Shavuot on Thursday night, so there will be services on Thursday night. I imagine it's usual time at 6 o'clock. And is there a cheesecake competition? There is. Bring and share for cheesecake, and there will be a light dinner, I imagine, afterwards. And then there will be a learning program, which I think it's Lael Bethlehem who's going to be speaking, and a few others, Merle Williams, Professor Merle Williams. And then we have a beautiful learning text that Professor Williams and I discussed as well from Tractate Shabbat, which we're going to do afterwards. For those of you who want to stay on afterwards, some midrashim about the giving of the Torah, and also we will look at what the great philosopher of the last century, Emanuel Levinas, philosopher, had to say about those texts. So that should be really interesting as well after the discussion and the talk. So please come 6 o'clock, I imagine, on Thursday night, and then all the way up to, we're not going to go through the night, but probably about 10:30 or something like that for those of you who wish to stay to that point. Tomorrow there is a service at, is it 9:30 as usual? And we also have the Talmud group at 12. Any other announcements for this week? Yes. Okay, so women's circle, for those who didn't hear, at 6 o'clock on Sunday in the lounge here, in the upstairs part, the youth lounge, and you bring and share a vegetarian snack. Okay, anyone else? Announcements? Okay, without that, I'm sure there's kiddush, etc. afterwards, which we'll do. So thank you, and thanks again to the choir, thanks to our IT team, and thank you very much. And we will conclude with Adon Olam, page 625. Shalom Aleichem. 627. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.